Good morning, everybody. We're very pleased to have Lizette Ridgeway with us here today. Lizette has presented a number of times at our conferences and done very well. We're very happy to have her. A little bit about her. Lizette has been with the Texas Education Agency for 7 years and currently oversees program monitoring for special education and career and technical education. So that's us. She holds a bachelor's degree from Texas A&M University and a master's degree with principal certification from West Texas A&M University. She is currently pursuing a doctoral degree in school improvement from Texas State. Prior to coming to the agency, Lizette served in various instructional roles at the campus and district level. Help me welcome Lizette Ridgeway.
Thank you so much. I'm always very pleased and honored to be asked to come back. So it always tells me, well, I did a pretty good job if they want me to come back. So thanks so much, Dale, for your introduction. This group and kind of this time of the year is always a perfect opportunity for us to share information regarding the state's monitoring system of PBMAS as well as our state intervention framework. Because I always tell people there's time for you to learn more before the next school year. So in the past, I have always really struggled with getting everything in the amount of time that we have, because in reality, I would say both PBMAS conversations and the intervention requirements are really an 8-hour training in themselves. And so trying to kind of fit this in an hour is pretty tough. And I always feel bad for kind of participants because I see it in your faces and it's kind of this deer in the headlight, like, oh my God, what is she talking about? And so to make myself feel better and to reassure all of you, we're going to take this as, it is going to be very high level. It is going to be a lot of information in a short amount of time. So we're going to think about it as a movie trailer. And if it piques your interest and you want to know more, I can point you in that direction of where you can find that information. But don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't understand what she just said. And I can be a resource for you throughout the year and this summer. So my purpose for our time together today is to really look at the information that you can kind of glean from the PBMAS report, kind of what PBMAS really is, so just kind of a review of that accountability system for special programs, to look at the identification and intervention, so what is the process, and then to kind of provide some information on the interventions that are required once you get your data released to you. So here is, I would say, the million-dollar questions that we have, and I think as CT administrators, this is maybe something that you reflect on frequently, is how do we know if our program is effective? And so I would say to kind of the starting point for answering that question would be to ask yourself, are you in accordance with any kind of state or federal laws? And that's kind of the first piece. And then the second piece is, do you have measurable, quantifiable results that you can show as far as how your students performing? So I think a data source that can kind of combine these two is the beautiful system that we have of PBMAS, because I think that has tied in a lot of these two questions to give you a starting point that's really rooted in data. So prior to 2003, for those of you that were in school districts, you might remember that we had a very much of a compliance-driven system. It wasn't necessarily focused on results or on student performance. It was very much compliance. The 78th legislative session kind of helped us shift into a different direction. So there was a lot of scrutiny as far as in the way that the TEA was serving as a regulatory agency, their support of districts, and really were we messaging that we were also expecting results as the outcome of ensuring that we were in compliance. And so we were really charged with trying to find the right balance of how can you really make both compliance and student performance or student outcomes or results kind of work together. So that is kind of how the performance-based monitoring analysis system, or PBMAS, kind of got its start. And so that has now been in place since 2004. It's a district-level program and report, and it's also really helped us shift our thinking away from the process of just being in compliance to kind of a dual role of both program effectiveness and student performance. And I think that with that, we can kind of look at what were the guiding principles. So what was it that really helped us get to that point? So I'm just going to highlight just a couple of those guiding principles, and then invite you to look and read the cover, kind of cover to cover of that PBMAS manual, because it really talks about these guiding principles in much more depth than I'll be able to get into today. So the first one that I want to touch on today is the school district effectiveness. So this was an opportunity, because it is a district level report. It was in a way that it can highlight that the district has kind of high expectations for all of its programs, regardless of the size of the district. It does fall on the district to ensure that you are serving all populations, or all students served through different special programs. The next piece is the indicator design. And so if you look at the indicators as they're outlined through each of the special programs, you'll see that there are some indicators that are carried across the program. So if you think about those performance indicators, but then there are also some indicators that are just program specific. So you'll have your non-traditionals, or you'll have your ones that are for special education, like least restrictive environment or discipline. So there are some that are just program area specific, but then there are some that allow you to see patterns and trends across program areas. The next piece is that there's an individual program accountability. So if you think about the way that it was when we were very much compliance focused, you would only receive a compliance visit maybe on a cyclical basis. With a shift over to PBMAS, every district in the state receives a PBMAS report every year. Regardless of any kind of identification or cyclical monitoring cycle, it is going to be, you're going to receive this data source at the same time as every other district every year. So this gives you almost a checkpoint that you have every year that you can then compare to provide you with some longitudinal data. And the last piece is that it is annual statewide evaluation. So we're able to slice this data in multiple different ways. So not only is every district given that kind of data, but also ESCs are able to compile, and we're able to give the ESCs for your region kind of this is what it looks like. We're able to look at it from the state's perspective. So we're able to identify where is it that we're making gains as a state, or where is it that we're making, that we're still seeing some challenges, or there's still some barriers. So performance levels, and so I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about what's currently going to be seen in the 2016, just a couple of things that the director of PBM has shared with us. So we know that we're still going to have performance levels of 0 through 4. You'll only see that 4 in bilingual and ESL and special education. The 0 required improvement, that means that on that particular indicator, that district made enough gains to get not to be at a 0, but they met the threshold, and so we're gonna say that they're moving in the right direction. If you see not assigned, that has to do with not reaching the minimum size requirement. So this is where I would probably put an asterisk, because while many times we don't use this data for staging, so therefore it could kind of affect your intervention requirements, but this is really important as CTE administrators for you to pay attention, because minimum size is kind of determined over a number of years. And so this is where sometimes those indicators can kind of creep up, and before you know it, it's an issue. So you want to make sure that you're staying on top of what does your actual data look like, and not just looking at those performance levels and concentrating on those upper levels of maybe 2, 3s, and 4s, but really also looking at the not assigned. The no data indicator is, just what it says, there is no data. This is where I would say as CTE administrators, you would want to ensure that you are aligned with the guidance that has been given at the state level, and that your coding is correct, because sometimes we have seen that there are some no data, but that has also created some issues later on. So this is where you want to make sure that everybody understands the coding requirements, everybody understands the guidance that's out there regarding the collection of data. Special analysis and report only. Special analysis is usually that the district is so small, or the size is so small for multiple years that they pull a group together in that division of performance-based monitoring to kind of look at the data before a performance level is given. And report only is usually only used when we're introducing a new indicator. And so this is so that CT administrators can kind of get ahead of the game, start the work before they're actually penalized, before that actually goes into the staging process. So if you'll remember, last year in 2015, you had the hold harmless. And so for this year, that performance level is not going to be on there, so the hold harmless, but that will be. So I think it was the STAR EOC had the hold harmless, so you'll want to ensure that this year that is a live indicator. Our overall goals for monitoring, and this is one of Rachel Harrington's slides that she always uses, and this is to show that while as an agency we have really worked to try to streamline it into one accountability system, there's really not a way to do that because the programs really vary so much. I think the different cuts of the data are really important. They kind of show us different pieces of where the needs lie. And so I think the important piece is that to ensure that you're using this data to the fullest capacity, and so that you can see that the way that these indicators, the results are given to districts is to really start to try to look at, are there patterns? Are there trends? Are there needs that go across program area? Are there needs that go across student groups? As well as the extent and duration of these needs. Because sometimes while you feel that something you've been doing about something, you still struggle with an indicator. You might want to also look, is there another program area that's also struggling? So this is an opportunity for you to really reach out to other members on your district leadership team and see where you can work together to really maximize those efforts. So it's really about a balanced perspective, kind of ensuring more effective and efficient work as you're trying to improve special programs. When you think about the coordination, we wanted to give you some insight, because this is, as staging is released, as PBMAS reports are released, we always try to give some insight as far as how we are organized currently at the agency. And so if you think about the three different divisions or departments that you could potentially interface with throughout the year, it's important for you to know as an administrator kind of what are the functions and who are these folks. So when you hear performance-based monitoring, or PBM, you want to think about that is where your PBMAS report data is released from. So you want to think about they're the identification piece. The director over there is Rachel Harrington. Program monitoring and interventions, you want to think of us, obviously, as the name implies, we are the monitoring group, but we're going to help you address those needs. And so when you think about what that means, the intervention requirements, that kind of lives with us, and that's the division that I'm with. And our director is Michael Greenwald. And then the program areas, which is probably who you interact with the most, is they're going to be the ones that are giving the guidance, and really they're the program area expertise folks, and so that is Diane Salazar and her group that lead those efforts at the agency. So, and I just kind of bulleted out what are the roles, what are the functions. So just kind of recap what we said, the PBMAS, PBM division, it's the PBM manuals, the calculations. If you have questions as far as how they got to that indicator, that's where you kind of want to direct your questions. PMI divisions, once you get into the staging, the intervention requirements, the monitoring, the submission of those improvement plans or quarterly reports, that does live with the PMI division. And then we work with the program areas to really look about, is there any new PBMAS indicators that need to be added? We see that these districts are continuing to struggle. What guidance has been given? How can we ensure that our monitoring is aligned with the guidance that's being given? So here's the status of the 2016 PBMAS Manual. So every year that does need to go through the adoption process. I believe it is still currently out for public comment until next Monday. At that time, all those comments will be addressed and it will be adopted, and we're thinking adoption process usually happens at the end of July. At that time, a TAA letter will go out and that manual will be posted. And so you'll want to ensure that you are familiar with, what are the indicator changes, and, if there's any differences in calculations or cut points, you'll want to familiarize yourself with that prior to the release of data, which is usually in August. So once you have that data, how will these interventions really help me improve the effectiveness of my program? So what we always talk about is the PBMAS report is sometimes underutilized. And I think that happens partly because people usually wait until they receive some sort of staging information, and so they're not using it as a data set. And so even though that goes out in August when all other accountability reports, and you see districts kind of moving to start having those data analysis discussions, the data that's included in the PBMAS report is rarely used until you actually get the staging. And at that point, sometimes it's just a little too late. And so this time of year is really the best time to kind of put it on people's radar so that they can remember. But this is really a tool when you think about a tool for a review of the effectiveness of your program, because regardless of staging, there's probably going to be areas of needs that you're going to want to address in your own plan. So that's kind of where the intervention activities come in, and kind of where we're going to be shifting our focus away from the identification piece over into what do we need to do to start the process of continuous improvement once we've identified these needs. So this is the state's framework for continuous improvement, and it's the Texas Accountability Intervention System, or the acronym TAIS. Maybe many of y'all have heard. What we always talk about is before you can actually get to the center or the heart of the framework, which is continuous improvement, it's really important to understand what those outer rings are. While they look really pretty, I think that they also kind of serve a purpose, and they kind of remind us kind of where that lives in the continuous improvement process. So the district commitments is how the district is involved, and it's their commitment to, whether it's the campuses or the programs, to help support them in this process. So if you think about the components of the district commitments, it's operational flexibility. So do the directors or do those campuses, are they allowed to do what they think that they need to do in order to improve student outcomes or student performance and program effectiveness? Is there a sense of urgency? Is there high expectations within that district to ensure that we are serving and supporting these students? And then also that it is a district-wide ownership and accountability. So this is to ensure that those special programs or those campuses aren't siloed in this work, because at the end of the day, it is that everybody's going to be responsible and everybody's going to be held accountable for this work. The support systems, as you kind of start coming in a little bit, that's evidence of the district commitment. So it's evidence that you have those conversations and those systems to help support you in this continuous improvement work. So it's things like organizational structure. Is the district or is a program or a campus structured in a way that's the most efficient and the most effective? Are there processes and procedures that will help ensure that you are in compliance and also serving students the way they need to be served to see those results? Are there processes for communication, and are there capacity and resources? So once you've identified, what it is that you need that needs to get done, then is there support, whether it's financial support, whether it's personnel support? Do you have everything that you need in those support systems to ensure that you're ready to begin this continuous improvement work? So at the heart of the framework is really what we spend our time really talking about in training, because this is the process for continuous improvement. And this is a process that, we talked about. We can't make it into one accountability system, but over the last 3 years, we've really tried to communicate that it is one intervention process. So it's regardless of whether you're identified at the campus level as an IR campus, whether you're safeguards only, whether you are a priority school, whether you're identified as staged within one of the program areas in PBMAS. the process for continuous improvement and those requirements were all of the same. And why? Because we really believe that it is about a process, and it's not about the compliance pieces of filling out the form that's going to help you create a sustainable change. So we've spent a lot of time training and kind of communicating what are those pieces. And while we have it in the context of the state adopted framework of TAIS, these concepts are not going to be new to you, because whether you've been in interventions or not, these are just basic processes of continuous improvement. So we're going to be digging in to kind of a high-level review of what is the TAIS process, or the continuous improvement process for the state of Texas. So when you think about going through the quadrants, the first step is really the data analysis. The outcome of data analysis is going to be your problem statements. And so here we have this problem statement single. More than likely, as you're reviewing your data, you're probably going to identify your data is going to lead you to more than one problem. So this is kind of, you're going to be identify the what. What needs to be addressed, or what are we going to start this work in doing? So it's really about the gap in the data. So as you look at maybe where your district is performing, or your particular program is reporting as compared to the standard or the district or the state rate, where is it that you see that there is some disconnects? And again, I'm going to say that we have one slide that represents about 2 hours worth of conversation in data analysis. In the needs assessment process, so as you continue on through the quadrants, you've identified your problem statements, and then you're going to start what's caused a root cause analysis, and that's really going to be your needs assessment. We have several different processes and suggestions that we've included on 2 really important websites, and I'm going to share those resources, those websites with you right now. The first one is tcdss.net, so tcdss.net. So TCDSS, they're the Texas Center for District and School Support. They are TEA's technical assistance provider, so they work very closely with us in developing our training and developing resources that campuses and districts can use while engaging in this work. And the next is TAIS, T-A-I-S, it's the acronym for the Texas Accountability Intervention System, TAISresources.net. So that has videos that can talk about what is the importance of root cause analysis. But this is where a district or a district leadership team is probably going to spend a very good amount of time, because you've identified what the problem is, then you really have to start identifying why that problem is occurring. And so many times, if there isn't enough time really digging deeper as to why that problem is occurring, you could potentially develop an entire plan that's not going to make any kind of movement into correcting that problem, because you could be addressing the wrong why. And so that's why I'm pointing you into these 2 resources that you have to kind of help you with that work, because that root cause analysis is so very important. So resources that you have that are probably way closer to home is your 20 service centers, because you have relationships with them. They provide this training. They work very closely with us as our partners, and so you really, if you feel like you're at a point where maybe you didn't get as much of an impact of your last year's plan, I would say partnering with your ESC to help you in the root cause analysis would be very beneficial. And so kind of putting that on your radar to help you, that is kind of where the critical work really truly happens. So once you've identified why the problem is occurring and what your root cause really is, then you're kind of going to be moving into the next quadrant, which is the improvement planning quadrant. And this is kind of your most robust quadrant, because this is where you're really going to start building your plan. So this is where you're going to start identifying the how. You're going to be focusing on identifying those annual goals, and you're going to be focusing on really looking at what are our strategies to help us achieve our annual goal. So making connections. So I would say a couple of years ago, and I think the CTE group has always talked about, and I actually, from Dale's presentation, there's going to be a lot of talk about program effectiveness. this is where you can really start thinking about making some of those connections when you hear about what are some characteristics of an effective CTE program, and start thinking about ways that you can actually align that with what are your annual goals that you're going to be creating and focusing on for this next year, or is there a strategy that they've shared that aligns with the root cause that you say you've identified for why your problems are occurring. So I would say that this is, in this particular quadrant, is where you can start bringing in what are some research-based strategies that will help CTE programs move forward, and then what are some goals that we want to set for ourselves and kind of try to capture those in your working plan. So to also think about some bigger connections to ensure that you have a really strong foundational piece to your district improvement plan is to ensure alignment between your problem statement and your annual goal. And so I've always talked about it's really important for us to have an end in mind, and so you're kind of starting with an end in mind. As you're developing this plan, you want to ensure where you want to be at the end of the year so that you can think through how you're going to be there. So you want to make sure that there is some sort of connection between where it is you want to go and where you currently are. And so making sure that those are SMART goals are always is always very important. So are they timely? Are they attainable? Based on your particular data, have you set a goal that's attainable for your particular district? The second connection is when you're thinking about strategy, is making sure that you're identifying a strategy that aligns with your particular root cause. And this is where I say that you can kind of use some research-based strategies that might be shared with you, either from our CTE partners at the agency, or as you attend different conferences and you have speakers or program area experts, they can help you or identify what are some strategies based on where our needs are. And like I said, this is, we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about strategy, because root cause and strategy, I feel like, is really the heart. It's going to be the heart of really trying to help you make those improvements. So this is a graphic that we've been using lately to help kind of have a visual representation of what it is that we're trying to do. So when we think about problem statement, it's really what our current state is. What does our data tell us? Where are we currently? Our annual goal, when we think about our annual goal, that's where we want to be at the end of the year. What is our desired state? And we're going to be thinking of our strategy. That's our how are we going to get there, and that's going to be the bridge. And then that's really going to, so here's the problem statement, the gap in the data. We need to identify what caused that gap, which is our root cause, and then our strategy is going to help us mend that gap or that crack. So we're going to start, as you've developed your strategy, this is the piece where I feel like districts have struggled the most. And so as you have the summer to start thinking about this process and maybe questions that you want to ask as the fall starts up and the new year and the development of a new plan, is the importance of quarterly planning for a district is really, if you were to think about, if you were to see a box and it was labeled strategy, it would be opening up that box is where you would find quarterly goals and interventions, because those quarterly goals and interventions are going to be focused on the implementation of your strategy. And I would say one of the biggest disconnects that we see from districts is that they align their quarterly goals to their annual goal. And so you'll see them develop their annual goal as, I want to improve by a certain number of percentage points. And so you will see that their quarterly goals then are a breakdown of whatever their annual goal is. So if they're trying to make a 20% gain, then they would try to do their quarterly goals as wanting to see a 5% gain over those 4 quarters. When approaching it that way is really a focus on the annual goal and not a focus on your strategy. And it's that strategy that is really going to be about stakeholder behaviors. And so that's what your quarterly goals need to be focused on. You need to be focusing on what is the difference, what are some different behaviors that you're going to see as you implement this strategy. So the first thing is to really think through, who are your stakeholders? Who is going to help implement this strategy that's going to address that root cause, or why you're having this disconnect in your data? And it's, to simplify, you're going to be kind of creating a to-do list. As we implement this strategy, What are all of the things that need to happen throughout the year in order for us to meet that annual goal? We also need to think about who are those stakeholders. And so here we have to think about who is helping us implement that strategy, or who's helping us build that bridge. So that could be the CTE director, but knowing that this is a district level program that's implemented on the campus, those stakeholders are also going to be your campus principals. Those stakeholders are also going to be the teachers that are serving those students, and the stakeholders are going to be those students as well. So as you're thinking through what is the to-do list in this strategy implementation, you need to take into account all of those different stakeholders, because you need to ensure that everybody's doing something different in order to get you a different result at the end of the year. This is a resource that we have on our website, and it's called the Stakeholder Behavior Brainstorm Sheet, I think. But it kind of reminds you can start thinking through the administrative team. If we're implementing, it could be, if a strategy is you're implementing PLCs to ensure that you have more data-driven decisions, that for that example, you're going to be thinking through the administrative team. What are they going to do? What are they going to do to ensure that PLCs can be implemented to ensure data-driven decisions? Teacher learning and teacher practice, we've always kind of made that we've always distinguished those two, because we think that teachers need to learn something different before they can do something different. So thinking through what is both the training aspect of this, but what does the implementation and monitoring of the outcome of that training look like? And then student learning. If all of us are doing something different, then we should be getting different outcomes throughout the year to ensure that we are well on our way to meet that annual goal. So what are those checkpoints that we want to have along the way to ensure that we're going to meet that annual goal at the end of the year regarding our students? So as you think about creating those quarterly goals, just kind of based on these pieces of information that I've given you, you have your to-do list of what everybody is going to be doing to implement your strategy, and then it's really going to be about chunking those. So if all of these behaviors happen, then what do we want to see as our checkpoint at the end of the first quarter? What's going to look different? Because if we're trying to see a 20% increase in a particular content, you're not going to have apples to apples comparisons at different points in the year. You'll have a benchmark, and maybe that's one piece of data, but you're also going to want to see some other data points. So you're going to want to kind of see what are your other checkpoints. Other checkpoints could be, what does it look like in the classroom as you're seeing this learning and teaching happening? So you might have some walkthrough data. So you'll want to make sure that you're kind of chunking it to give you different checkpoints along the way to ensure that you are still on track with that strategy implementation. And then the last quadrant is the implementation and monitoring. So knowing that this continuous improvement process is a living and breathing document, you know that you're going to be implementing and monitoring it kind of throughout the year. As you're coming together quarterly, because that is our suggestion, is that district leadership teams are coming in to discuss your data and to make any mid-course corrections if you see that you're not on your way to meet those annual goals. And so knowing that it is going to be those quarterly checkpoints, they're going to maybe raise that red flag that's saying, okay, at this point, maybe we have not seen the impact of our training. So we've provided these PLC trainings, we've provided models, but as we're going around, maybe we're noticing that teachers aren't attending these PLCs, or teachers don't truly understand the purpose of what this time should be used for. And so that would be a time when you would probably need to make a mid-course correction to go back and address those issues before you can, you don't want to just continue moving forward assuming that you still can make that 20% increase if you know that there's still some big foundational pieces that haven't occurred. So the importance of implementation and monitoring, and that's why we really try to have our districts report to us at a quarterly basis so that we can kind of ask some probing questions to help you problem solve, so we can be kind of some thought partners for you during that time throughout the year. So I know I mentioned earlier that as an agency, we are focused kind of both on compliance and really about the process and effectiveness of programs. So one of the things that we wanted to share is that change just doesn't happen. We have to create it. And I think as leaders at the district level, you all are empowered with that opportunity. And so it's really taking every year as a new piece of data and as a new opportunity to kind of make things different for your particular district and for the students that you serve. And then it really is about having to do something different in order to get something different at the end. So I think Henry Ford is the one that says, if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And so that's what when we're talking about this improvement plan and the importance of strategy implementation, it is about doing things differently. And it's about everybody kind of pitching in and doing something different in order to get a different result for our students. So as an agency, our upper leadership, kind of starting with the commissioner and the district and our deputy commissioners, is really focusing on student outcomes. And the only way that we can help impact our student outcomes is to really focusing on changing adult behaviors. And so thinking about who are all those adults that interact with our students every single day. And so what changes do we need to make as adults in order to have the biggest impact on improving student outcomes for the students that we serve. And I think part of that is going to start with a change in mindset. And I think that one of some of the takeaways that I want to leave you with today as we talk about changing our behaviors in the way that we serve our students and then helping us as change agents to help change the mindsets of the adults that our students come in contact with, is putting value in really knowing and using the data that you have available to you early. And so really knowing that this work is going to take collaboration and a coordination of efforts. When I review the CTE reports across the state, I see that most of the time the staging or the identification of these districts for improvement is not truly a CTE issue. It's actually two other student populations that are impacting the CTE, and so I think that's a reminder that we need to all work together. So a lot of times I see that it is a CTE SPED issue or a CTE LEP issue, and so therefore you want to ensure that it's not you and your department alone that's trying to problem solve and develop an improvement plan to help impact those outcomes. And so it's really about being proactive. So like I said, this is the best time for you to start thinking about how can we make time for this work this summer and in the fall? How can we make time throughout the year next year to come together and review data to ensure that we are on track to meet our annual goals and that you're very thoughtful about addressing issues as you see them and not necessarily waiting for that staging or waiting until your data tells you that it's created this sense of urgency. And so it's really staying on top of that and being proactive. And it's really a commitment to continuous improvement. So I think that we are all in this field. It's definitely not money that brings us here. I think it's passion and it's wanting to do really good work. And so I think that we have proven that we have a commitment to continuous improvement and really trying to improve the education for our students. But it's about how can we then capture that so that everybody's on the same page and you're really working smarter and not harder. Any questions? I don't know where I am on time.
About 12 minutes.
Okay. Your service centers, if you were to reach out to them, most of them are probably in the process of calendaring out their TAIS 101 sessions. Do you have any ESC folks?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, is that kind of where y'all are? Is kind of calendaring out when is those TAIS 101 sessions going to occur in the fall? It is not currently a requirement for program directors to attend that. I think it should be because I think that this is kind of where we start creating this miscommunication and this gap in what needs to be done, who's actually doing it, and who's trained to do it. And so I would say looking into when those trainings are offered would be very beneficial for you. It is usually anywhere between a 4-hour to an 8-hour training depending on the service center. But it really helps set a context for how to engage in this work. Like I said, it's not new concepts, but there is a process that we want to ensure that everybody's equipped with. Yes.
Thanks for laying all this out for us, Lizette. Excellent job. I want to go back for just a second and sort of maybe ask you to look at special ed and CTE, but you mentioned that intersection that you see from time to time. Without going into a lot of detail, but can you kind of lay out a scenario or a recent example where you saw a CTE program and had this intersection and it was staged or they needed, just sort of walk us through that a little bit, what it looks like and why?
Yeah,
what they did.
For those of you that have attended a TAIS session or have seen one of our recordings, we really try to provide a kind of a concrete example. And we've always used special education or bilingual ESL as kind of our examples. And what we hear from CTE administrators is show us what it looks like if it was a CTE SPED issue or a CTE LEP issue, because we see that so often. And so that is currently what we're hoping to do right now, and so that you do have some sort of model of what that looks like, knowing that you have kind of so many different aspects. So I would say you would see that as in a performance piece. And so that's where it's really about making sure that you have the right people at the table. And so if you're talking about performance for a student that's identified as a student with disability that's served through special education, but that's also enrolled in CTE courses, then you're a stakeholder in that conversation. So it's going to, you're gonna come in with, the way that I touch this student is that they're being served through CTE courses. The special education director is going to come into that conversation, and her stakeholder role is going to be, as the director of special education, I'm ensuring that we are providing the necessary services as we've outlined in the student's IEP to be successful. The campus principal is also going to be a stakeholder, talking about this student is on our campus, we're providing the services, then my role is going to be, do we have what we need on this campus to serve this student both in a CTE course as well as in all their core classes or elective classes. And so it is going to be about them all problem solving together, because this could also be where curriculum comes in, because if it's a math issue, then it's going to have to be all of you working together, and it's kind of a united front on, we have these students identified that really need help in math. So what is it that we can do as a campus or as a district to serve these students better? And so it's really, you can't think about it in silos, because if it was a CTE issue, then you're going to start talking about CTE effectiveness, and you're going to say, oh, well, one of the issues is that we're going to maybe effective program, you're going to do an annual evaluation. I look to my CTE group as far as what one of the characteristics of an effective program. If you were to do that and address it that way, you're not going to see any kind of progress for that particular student when you're thinking about student outcomes. So therefore, that data point is going to remain the same on your PBMAS report. And so it is about, and that's why I gave the example about PLCs. Because one of the things when I think about lack of coordination and collaboration is that sometimes CTE teachers are not always involved in the conversations that have to do with curriculum on a campus, or have to do with how we're serving our English language learners, or how we're serving our students with disabilities, even though it has an impact on them. And so it's a reminder to include the directors at the district level, if there's coordinators that kind of support the campuses, and then also it's important to ensure that the CTE teachers are also involved in those conversations. So whether that happens at a PLC meeting when you're actually looking at who are our students that are struggling the most, or who are those that are kind of on the fence, and how can we make sure that we're working together to get those students to improve their student outcomes. So that's just kind of one example. I hope that kind of give you some information, So I will share just one other piece of information with the release of about data release that came out yesterday as far as TAA that Commissioner Morath sent out. We are working on extending the end of year submission for the district PBMAS submissions that was on June 30th. We're looking to extend that so that districts actually have their data. So that communication will be coming out very soon. We're also looking to send out some data regarding our 16-17 planning. So we are hearing that because the data is being delayed right now, that could also then give a delay on the release of data like PBMAS reports, which that's always been in August. And so we're hoping to communicate that out very soon. So I would just be checking your inbox in the next week or so. All right. Here's contact information if you need to reach us. And again, this is where I always say it was just a movie trailer today. And so if there was anything that piqued your interest and you want to learn more, it is about reaching out to us, reaching out to your service centers to point you in the right direction so that you're informed enough to and feel confident enough to really to do the work once you're in your district. So congratulations on wrapping up your first year, and thank you so much for having me.